Welcome to the Stellar Vault. Say hi in the comments to awaken the archive. Then like, subscribe, and let the tale begin.
Do not engage. They're not hunting. They're testing. It's a trap. Signal corrupted. Source: Kovac 12. Terran scout vessel. Priority: Alpha emergency. The static bleeds through the Terran command relay system before being cut by a hardline override. Silence swells again in the black. Then, a flare of blue-white as a Terran marine dropship tears from FTL over Sector Wraithfall, its hull scorched with dust from dead stars. No other vessels in sight, just the dark edges of a system no species dares to chart. Inside the bay, Falk's Team 3 locks gear and checks weapons in silence. No jokes, no banter, just tension you can feel through the armor seals. Lieutenant Commander Roan Vecker stands by the loading ramp, helmet tucked under his arm. He's already suited, his armor matte black with hand-forged reinforcement plating over standard issue. The kind only combat veterans wear. The kind that tells a story without a word. "Eyes up," Vecker says, voice hard as orbital glass. "We're not retrieving cargo. We're sending a message." A sharp nod from the team. Helmets on. Systems green. The dropship punches through Atmo toward the last ping from Kovac 12. The world below was marked red in every Terran database. An uninhabitable jungle moon orbiting a gas giant with no strategic value. No resource markers. No known life signs. And now, one missing scout vessel. As the ship cut through the thermals, its outer hull howled from the pressure drop. Turbulence rolled under the belly, shaking the crew in their grav couches. No one spoke. 100 insertions like this, and still, no one relaxed. Through the viewport, the jungle spread like a cancer. Towering fungal trees reached impossible heights, capped with translucent crowns that shimmered as if feeding on solar radiation. Vines thick as exocables weaved a canopy so dense it choked out all but the highest peaks of the derelict outpost. Smoke rose in thin, disciplined plumes, recent fires, not wild ones. As soon as the skids hit ground, Vecker was out the ramp. Falk's Team 3 followed in staggered formation. 6 men, disciplined and determined. Each footstep sank into loam that hissed beneath their boots. The air was hot, humid, and carried the metallic tang of something artificial left to rot. Juno, the team's comms and surveillance specialist, scanned the perimeter. "We're on the outer ring of the outpost grid. Place got torn open." More like, "It got peeled," Dallin, the tracker, muttered. He was crouched beside a collapsed support strut. "Look at this. Cut marks curve inward, like it got opened from the outside but not by blast. More like claws." The outpost wasn't large. 3 central prefab structures, a shattered comms tower, and half a dozen smaller buildings scattered like broken toys. But the damage was methodical. One wall left intact here, another ripped apart there. Power cables severed at angles, cameras removed. No random destruction. Every act of violence here had purpose. Inside what was left of the comms tower, Vecker found the black box jammed between a shattered desk and the leg of a corpse, its arm still reaching toward the ceiling hatch. He pulled it free, passed it to Juno. "Patch it in. Let's see what they saw." The footage was corrupted. Even before the signal played, static crawled across the screen in waves, like something was pushing back against the recording itself. Juno stabilized what he could. The screen flickered. The crew of the Kovac 12 moved through the jungle, their body cams showing caution, but no panic. Then shadows. Movement that wasn't in sync with the environment. One by one, members of the scout team vanished from the video feed, each loss silent, efficient. No screams, no plasma bursts, just disappearance. Until one feed caught it, just for a second. A humanoid silhouette, lean and tall, crouched in a tree. It moved in perfect silence, dropped from a 20-meter branch, landed without sound, and disappeared in under a second. No armor, no gear, just black, mottled skin, and eyes that glinted like obsidian. Juno froze the frame. Vecker leaned in, brow furrowed. Rewind. That blur. Back 5 seconds. Juno complied. They all saw it the second time. Not the creature, but what it wore. That's a Terran knee plate, Dallin whispered. It's wearing parts of our exosuits. They didn't kill us for food, Vecker said, low. Sounds like they're learning, testing us. Why tear up the buildings like that, though? Asked Kearns, the heavy weapons man. Camouflage, Vecker replied. Controlled damage. They staged it to seem chaotic, but it's calculated. They searched the rest of the site. Nothing living. But the signs were everywhere. Clawed handprints in steel, dragging marks where bodies had been pulled with care, not haste. In one of the outbuildings, Dallin found a mural scratched into the wall with something sharp and unnatural. It wasn't art. It was strategy. Dozens of diagrams of Terran unit formations, patrol patterns, weak points, labeled in their own tactical symbology. It unsettled them in a way the corpses hadn't. This wasn't just a massacre. It was a deconstruction, a study. After that, the team moved quieter, tighter formations, weapons higher. They didn't say it, but every step felt heavier. Like the jungle wasn't just watching, like it had already decided what happened next. They stayed too long. During the third perimeter sweep, Dallin vanished. 1 minute he was reporting a movement signature. The next, his feed cut. A few seconds later, it reactivated on its own, streaming in real time. His cam showed dense jungle, whip-fast movement, then flickered to flashes of his face, blood running down from his scalp, his weapon gone. He was fighting. Hands, knife, grunts and snarls. The feed went black. They reached him 7 minutes later. He was already dead, slumped at the base of a tree, throat torn open. But in his hand, he still clutched a shard of bone, buried deep into something that still twitched beside him. Not one of the creatures from the video. Something else. The corpse was almost human-sized, armored in patchwork plating made from Terran combat gear. What hadn't been melted was reshaped to fit its twisted frame. The armor still bore the Kovac 12 logo. They've been watching us, Vecker said, kneeling beside the thing. Wearing us. Juno's bioscan spat out garbage data. Biomass inconsistent. No known respiratory or circulatory match. They're not native to this system, he said, standing. Looks like we failed one, Kearns muttered. No, Vecker said. We passed. This is their failure. They set charges. Every structure, every data point, every scrap of material that wasn't theirs. Vecker gave the go signal without ceremony. As the dropship lifted through the smoke, the entire outpost went nova, in a bloom of incineration. From orbit, the jungle smoldered like a cauterized wound. Then, flare. Left ridge, Juno said, zooming in. Another flare, then another, perfectly spaced. He keyed the long-range comms and punched in the emergency encryption string. Earth Command, this is Lieutenant Commander Roan Vecker, Falx Team 3. Red level transmission. Sector Wraithfall. Confirm immediate lockdown protocols and orbital interdiction. Threat level adjusted. Sentient. Non-native. Hostile. Strategic. He paused. Watched the flames, knuckles white on the blast shield. They came here to study us. They just learned the wrong lesson. A final message, transmitted straight into Earth's relay core. The hunters aren't native. They're coordinated, strategic. They came to measure us. But now they know what humans do to predators. The dropship's engines howled as it cut through the dense atmosphere of Wraithfall's jungle moon for a second insertion. Its black hull still bore the scorch marks from the last extraction. Now it flew low and slow, terrain hugging through toxic mist and canopy breaches that glowed from the previous detonation site. The coordinates were precise, grid 7E, where the alien flare sequence had originated. No one on board spoke. Lieutenant Rowan Vecker stood near the ramp once again, unshaken, silent. His posture was iron straight, armor sealed and ready. Falk's team moved with grim focus, fully suited and combat ready. Since Dallon's death, the unit had shifted. Quieter. Meaner. No one called it grief. That wasn't protocol. But it weighed in every step. The terrain below opened into a twisted clearing, unnaturally symmetrical, flanked by burned-out trunks and crushed canopy. The ship hovered just long enough to deploy its cargo of 6 armored men. Once boots hit the dirt, they moved. Mace, the new tracker, moved too fast. His footing slipped once on a mossy rise, nearly toppling him. "Mace," Vecker growled through the comm. "You fall in echo range. You don't get back up." "Aye, sir," Mace muttered, steadying. The jungle here wasn't wild. It was shaped, not just cleared, but curated. Vines hung at right angles. Branches grew in mirrored patterns. The flora had been guided by an intelligence that understood human paths. The soldiers swept through it like rats in a lab, built just for them. Gray, the newest addition to Falk's team, crouched with a sensor dish and long-range dampener. A systems tech and signal analyst by designation. He cursed under his breath. "Motion scanners glitching every 43 seconds. Exactly. Doesn't matter which direction we point. They're echoing our own pulses back at us." Vecker looked at the terrain, then at the overlapping shadows where sound didn't belong. "Someone built this for us," he said. "Just not for us to win." Kearns, their Heavy and marksman, swept his modified HSG-20 across the tree line. He was calm, precise. The kind of man who'd been through too many drops to be spooked. But even he muttered something when a low hum began to build, like distant machinery. Except there was no machinery. Every noise bounced in 2 directions. The jungle didn't just muffle, it reflected. The men took to calling it what it was, the echo range. The team advanced deeper. Controlled burns lined the ground, black streaks in patterns that mirrored Terran artillery layouts. Nearby, drag lines traced back into undergrowth that swallowed footprints in seconds. The false sense of quiet broke when Kearns spotted it. Something metallic crouched on a ridge above them, half covered in moss. "PXR-7 drone," he said, narrowing his eyes. "Terran make, scout class." "No recon units made it out here," Gray replied. Kearns approached with caution. The unit was pristine. Too pristine. Its edges looked grown, not welded. Before anyone could speak, the drone unfolded, rotating on its axis into a turret form that hummed with stored kinetic charge. It opened fire. The squad scattered as its pulse rounds bit through bark and armor plating alike. Vecker dove behind a trunk as Mace hit the dirt, stunned by the blast shock. Kearns didn't hesitate. He brought the HSG to bear and laid down 3 bursts that shredded the drone's core. It whined like an animal as it died. Juno ran up to examine the wreck. "This isn't Terran. Not really." Inside, the parts pulsed faintly. Organic sinew laced between carbon scaffolding. Power cells made of muscle fiber, not wire. "They built copies of our tech," Gray muttered. "Bio-coded. Guess they've been collecting our corpses." "Replicating gear," Vecker added, rising. They moved on. An hour in, the trees thinned, revealing a clearing with 6 helmets staked into the soil. Each Terran issue. Cracked visors, heat burns, impact marks. None from Falx. None from Kovacs 12. Gray lifted one, scanned it. No active biotags, no registered personnel. Just armor. Before Vecker could respond, a beacon lit up. An evac signal. Pure, encoded in Terran standard. The voice that followed was crisp, familiar. "Falx 3, this is Captain Ral Oryx, requesting evac. I'm at grid." Cut. Silence. Mace blinked. Did he say Oryx? Vecker's jaw set. He did. But Oryx died 9 months ago. Died on Pyrrhus Belt. "Signal's clean," Gray confirmed. "Full ID header, real encryption." "They're not imitating," Vecker said. "They're manipulating." He drew his rifle tight across his chest. "We move in. Tight lines. Helmets locked. If you hear a voice you know, ignore it." They advanced into the final sector, where the beacon pulsed. At the edge of a ravine, they found it, mounted on the chest plate of a Terran pilot, or what used to be one. His skin had been flayed clean, stretched like a shroud over the unit's front plate. The beacon pulsed from within his hollowed chest cavity. Mace stumbled back. Kearns held him up. But the jungle didn't wait. 3 shadows shimmered into view, cloaked forms rippling in and out of visibility, rushing the team with unnatural grace. They were tall, hunched, armored in reflective plating that absorbed targeting lasers and bent light. Their movement was a cross between a spider and a man. Vecker shouted and fired, catching one in the shoulder. It hissed, reeled, but vanished again. The second crashed into Juno, knocking him flat before being tackled by Kearns's shoulder charge. They hit the ground together in a mess of limbs and steel. Kearns unloaded at point-blank range. His rounds punched through the Predator's midsection, black ichor spraying the moss. The third went for Vecker, fast. Too fast. It slashed across his arm, spinning him to the ground. He roared in pain, pinned. Then, a single, thunderous crack. Kearns stood 50 meters off, rifle braced on a moss-covered root, scope aligned. The round tore the Predator's head open, a clean, deliberate shot. But a retaliatory strike followed, a barbed spear-like weapon hurled in an arc. It hit him low, driving deep into his thigh. Kearns staggered, blood soaking his leg armor. Mace froze, eyes wide, rifle half raised. "Mace!" Vecker bellowed from the dirt. "You wanted to see what hunts the hunters? Look in the mirror and fire." The rookie blinked, once, twice, then screamed back and opened up in full auto, his fire pushing the last attacker back. Gray and Juno flanked, coordinating a cross angle. The Predator dropped, bleeding out in spasms. Silence returned. Juno was alive. Kearns bloodied but upright. Gray limping, Mace shaking, but alive. Vecker stood slowly, his side torn and armor cracked. Status, he demanded. Beacon's offline, Gray said, but there's still something transmitting below us. What kind of signal? Not one, Gray said. A recording. Of us. I hear our commands, our voices, from the last fight, even our stress tones. It's like they're building a behavioral map. Vecker stepped toward the final predator corpse. It wore a Terran helmet, intact, unscratched. They're not just copying us, he said. They're trying to become us. The team didn't respond. No words left. Above, the clouds thickened again, gray and waiting. Below, the jungle whispered and remembered everything. 1 week after the Wraithfall Basin operation, Falk's team was pulled from ground rotation and stationed aboard the orbital platform, Argent Spire, for recovery and debrief. Repairs were made. Armor, weapons, bodies. Not all wounds closed. Juno was reassigned to a classified comms sweep on the periphery front. The rest of the team barely had time to recalibrate before the next mission dropped. A recon insertion at Ashfield Ridge. Another red zone. Another uncharted piece of hostile ground. Ashfield Ridge was dying. Rain came down in sheets, thick and hard, like it meant to scrub the land clean of everything sentient. The air smelled of ozone and soil rot. Falk's team huddled in a break of the shattered ridgeline beneath jagged metallic trees that rose like antennae from the earth, each one humming, faint but constant, just outside of human hearing. Lieutenant Rowan Vecker crouched beside a jut of stone, armor sealed but favoring his side, scar tissue pulling tight beneath the plating. The Predator's blade from Wraithfall had left a reminder, even after field treatment. Gray and Kearns worked nearby, one setting up the sealant field, the other calibrating dampeners. The rain didn't help. Every few seconds, it hissed on open circuits, carrying static through every metal surface it touched. Next time we drop into a training ground built to kill us, Kearns muttered, voice low as thunder rolled. Maybe we nuke it first. Vecker didn't reply. His jaw was locked, eyes fixed on the trees. He could hear them, not with his ears, but through his skull. Every drop of water that hit their chiseled surface carried a vibration, like a sonar loop bouncing back and forth between trunks. They weren't trees. They were listening. The storm's being manipulated, Gray said, looking at his scanner. These towers are conducting the rainfall, not just passively, intentionally, feeding the energy back underground. Listening post? Kearns asked. Gray nodded. This whole valley is one. Then we talk quiet, Vecker said, forcing himself to sit up, and make sure what they hear is fear. Theirs. The team regrouped beneath a fractured canopy as night settled into the bones of the ridge. Sensors were unreliable. Comms burst static. But the brimstone beacon had arrived, buried inside a drop pod, cratered into the open basin just below. It looked unremarkable. A waist-high monolith wrapped in armor plating, with 6 directional antennae curled like claws. The tech was experimental, still unofficial. A signal decoy designed not just to mimic human comms, but command-level chatter, designed to bait intelligent enemies. This is the part where they think we've come to die again, Vecker said, standing now, helmet tucked beneath one arm. Let's show them we brought something better. They moved like shadows. No idle chatter, no movement wasted. Mace took up a perimeter overwatch, still limping from the last engagement but sharper now, less jitter. Kearns worked the ground-side stabilizers, while Gray tuned the beacon. When it activated, the shift was immediate. The basin lit faintly, not with light, but with intent. Every rustle in the foliage around them seemed to listen, then move. Not charge, not rush, just shift. Watching, judging. They heard it, Gray said, voice tight. 3 figures approached from opposite ends of the basin, tall, smooth, half-cloaked in reactive mesh that shimmered like oil under rainlight. One moved slowly, deliberate. The other 2 flanked it like hounds waiting to be unleashed. "That one in the center," Vecker said, pointing. "That's the tactician. Kill the thinkers, and the hunters scatter." The predators didn't charge. They stalked, observed. Then they stopped, 30 meters out, sensing the trap, but unwilling to ignore the challenge. Mace dropped to one knee and leveled his plasma rifle. "Range?" Kearns whispered. "Dead on," Mace answered. Then Thum. The plasma round snapped the air apart and burned a hole straight through the tactician's chest. It staggered, tried to stand, then collapsed in a heap of bleeding armor. The 2 others screamed, not in grief, but rage. One charged Kearns. The other went straight for Gray's flank. They moved with animal speed, but without focus now. Falk's team split them with crossfire, drove them into terrain that offered no escape. Gray dropped his with a stun burst to the neck, then a blade to the throat. Kearns used a proximity mine and a shotgun barrel at kissing range. The engagement was over in 24 seconds. Silence returned, broken only by the slow whine of the brimstone beacon powering down. Mace stood still for a moment, panting, gun smoking. That felt different. "It was," Vecker said. "We dictated the fight." After confirming the area was secure, Gray went to work on the last predator's neural rig, still twitching beneath shattered cranial plating. He hooked in a portable decrypt node and ran a pulse scan. "What is it?" Kearns asked. Gray didn't answer at first. Then, "Not a message, not a map. It's a code base, a law." The others gathered as he displayed the cracked structure. 3 lines, pulsing in crude but legible digital glyphs. Only hunt those who hunt. 2. Record the kill. 3. Adopt the fallen apex behavior. "That last one's recent," Gray added. "Time-stamped, not part of their root code. This was added within the last 7 days." "They didn't make that for us," Kearns muttered. "No," Gray said. "They made it because of us." Vecker nodded, slow and deliberate. His voice came out like gravel sliding over steel. "They're adapting to the fact we don't run. They're rewriting the food chain." No one argued. There was nothing to say. When the beacon shut down, Falk's team moved down into the basin. They didn't retreat. They advanced. At the center, Vecker drove a spike into the mud, a steel rod taken from the Kovac-12 wreckage. Atop it, they mounted the predator's skull, jaw wired open in silent scream. Mace, silent, pulled a knife from his boot and sliced a line across his forearm. Blood ran down, thick and red. He painted a single mark on the predator's brow, a Terran strike sigil. "You wanted a new law?" he said, quiet. "Here's ours. Don't hunt what bleeds and shoots back." Vecker didn't smile, but his eyes were alive. Behind them, the valley's rain still fell. But now, the sound it carried felt less like static and more like warning. They didn't wait for medals. They didn't wait for rest. Less than 6 hours after tearing through the Apex tacticians at Ashfield Ridge, Falk's team was already redeploying, back into Sector Wraithfall. Vecker had flagged anomalous energy patterns coming out of a deep basin labeled Echo Scar, along with movement signatures that matched archived Terran kill patterns. He relayed the data to command. Clearance came fast. So did the green light. The night above Echo Scar was not dark. Twin artificial moons hovered in a slow, synchronized orbit over the valley basin. Perfect spheres, matte black, but haloed in phosphorescent static, their surfaces rippling with pulses. Every few seconds, a sharp click echoed down across the jungle walls, followed by a low hum. Echolocation. Falk's team didn't need Gray to confirm it. They could feel it in their teeth. They moved through shadows, armor slick with moisture, rifles low, optics dimmed. The moss underfoot glowed pale green, enough to see shapes, but not faces. The team was silent save for the whisper crunch of movement through fungal dust. Every leaf, every lichen patch, felt artificial, too symmetrical, too curated. Vecker led point. His movements were lean, controlled, each step measured, every scan precise. No wasted energy, no excess breath. Behind him, Mace laid a javelin charge against the root of a metallic stalk, arming the timer with quiet, practiced hands. Kearns watched from the rear, plasma shotgun drawn, motion tracking dialed down to minimize sensor ghosting. Gray moved alongside him, tablet slaved to the uplink node hidden in his gauntlet. The moons above clicked again. Closer. They're sweeping intervals, Gray muttered. Grid mapping. Not for position. Behavior. Which behavior? Kearns asked. Our habits, our hesitation, Gray said. The pathing we used last time. They're recreating it. Mace glanced up at the moons, his brow furrowing. So this map, this whole canyon. Gray nodded. It's a memory. They're running drills on our playbook. Vecker didn't stop moving. Then they're about to fail the test. They split without speaking. Standard breach and echo protocol. Vecker and Mace took the ridge path, tight through the spine of collapsed basalt and hollowed roots. Kearns and Gray circled low. Bait detail. The ravine ahead was where Gray's last recon drone had vanished. Its signal cut mid-transmission, but tagged by a brief pulse of Terran code. That same pulse was now active again. Kearns muttered, "Something's calling us in our own language. I hate that." No sooner had he spoken than it began. Movement, deliberate and rhythmic. Shadows approached in formation. The outlines were wrong. Slouched shoulders, limbs slightly too long, but upright, organized. Then, a voice. Tango 2, push left flank. It was rough, garbled, like static being forced through vocal cords not meant for speech. The phrase was Terran tactical dialect, used in flank suppression protocols. The team froze. Another voice followed. From a second shadow. 4 sweep. T converge. Gray hissed. That's our comm doctrine. They're not speaking it, Vecker replied through grit teeth. They're reciting it. Studying fear commands. The first figure stepped into view. Bipedal. Armored in reactive mesh that shimmered with stolen Terran insignia. The helmet it wore was sculpted, not manufactured. Its jaw was exposed. The mouth moved. It was smiling. Mace didn't wait. He charged. The mimic stuttered. Hesitated. The illusion cracked in that moment. The hesitation wasn't programmed. It was emotional. Mace slammed into it, firing point blank, vaporizing the predator's chest as it stumbled back and collapsed into the moss. A second one shrieked and darted away, but Vecker gunned it down in motion, not even breaking stride. Back in the core node, Gray dropped to one knee and jacked directly into a captured drone relay. The feedback screamed through his neural link, almost tearing his earplugs out. "What the hell are they transmitting?" Kearns said, dragging one of the mimic's corpses away from the path. Gray blinked, stared at the data scrolling. Not tactics, not comms, genetic code. Sequence strands with Terran labels, and not just baseline DNA. This is conditioned imprint data. Reflexes, cortical decay thresholds, pain tolerance. "You're saying they're replicating how we survive," Kearns muttered. "No," Gray corrected, horror dawning in his voice. "They're grafting it." They followed the uplink deeper, through a narrow slit in the canyon wall, a chamber lit by that same green moss, with hovering moons casting rhythmic pulses. At the center stood the apex, but it wasn't what they expected. It didn't move like a predator. It didn't carry a weapon. It stood tall, motionless, ringed by small creatures with incomplete armor. Juveniles or test forms, hard to say. The apex's body was lean, wiry, and covered in networked tendrils connected to biocore tanks and stasis tubes that lined the chamber walls. Not a warrior, a gene crafter, a bioengineer. Vecker raised his rifle. The apex stared at him, then raised its own claw, not in defiance, but invitation. Behind it, dozens of transparent chambers pulsed with faint light. Inside each, a humanoid silhouette. Some Terran, some not. "They're not training," Gray whispered. "They're rewriting what it means to be Predator." A shimmer swept through one of the tanks, red strands embedded in tissue. Terran DNA. Vecker gave the order. "Burn the mirror." Mace threw the signal beacon into the apex's rig. Gray wired the feedback loop directly into the uplink chain. The echo moons shuddered. Static spiked into the ground like lightning without thunder. The air warped. The chamber collapsed into chaos. EM snares activated, slamming one of the brutes into a containment pillar. Mace tackled another, dragging it into the feedback surge until it convulsed and went limp. The apex didn't scream. It simply stepped back, claws behind its back, and watched as the grid failed, its creations dying around it. Its final transmission flashed across the team's HUDs in perfect Terran syntax. "You adapt imperfectly. We adapt permanently." The rig collapsed. The signal died. Falk's team exfilled under blackout, using emergency nav flares to cut through the false moon coverage. The jungle didn't chase them. No new predators came. The silence said more than words. In orbit aboard their escort corvette, Vecker stood at the viewport as the final strike report uploaded. The Predator fleet drifted without formation. No signal hierarchy, no kill songs, no command beacons. The Apex system had been decapitated. But Terran Command wasn't done. A priority flag pulsed red on the uplink. "Target of opportunity identified. Biovault escaping local gravity. Deep space intercept mandatory." Vecker glanced at Mace, who was still covered in Predator blood and Terran ash. "Thought they'd learned enough," Vecker said. Mace shook his head. "Guess not." The drop from orbit felt heavier than it should have. Not from gravity. Black Spire's launch vector was flawless. But the mission bore a weight no re-entry math could balance. Falk's team was just leaving Echo Scar when the uplink pinged. A biovault fleeing Wraith Fall's gravity well. Command flagged it as a priority intercept. Gray traced the trajectory, a cold drift through the Delta 9 expanse, where signals thinned and debris floated like forgotten gods. There, they found it. The Apex Evolution Cradle. It didn't fly. It waited, curled in silence, vast and hunched like a larval beast caught mid-pulse. Half-grown, half-built, it was a foundry for predators, birthing tanks, mutation halls, gene script engines, all stitched together beneath a skin of warm metal and living bone. It wasn't just a warship. It was worse. It was the future, unbound. Inside the drop capsule, no one spoke. Kearns strapped his bulk down, running diagnostics on the fusion shears mounted to his exo-rig. Gray had been wired into the cradle's faint signal bleed for over 2 hours, face lit by a pulsing green screen. Mace sat still, calm now, not green anymore. He was sharpening the edge of his gauntlet blade against the steel footpad. Vecker sat helmet in lap, eyes shut, lips barely moving, counting steps, rehearsing outcomes. Not hope, just execution. Touchdown in 30, Gray said, voice low. No defense fields, no heat flares. Looks quiet, too quiet. Vecker opened his eyes. It's not quiet. It's patient. They're waiting for us to fail. The capsule sliced clean into the cradle's underbelly, mag-synced and opened on silence. The corridor they entered was long, vascular, and wrong. Metal plated with sinew. Soft light bled from overhead nodes, casting red halos that pulsed with syncopated rhythm. Feels like a heartbeat, Kearns muttered, checking his 6. Not heartbeat, Gray corrected. Sequencing loop. The cradle's mid-cycle. Active gestation. More soldiers, Mace asked. Or something new. They advanced. The inner architecture was built for function, not form. Hallways weren't right-angled. They branched. Hatches didn't open. They retracted like eyelids. Along the walls, clear sacs pulsed with fluid. Within them, incomplete predator forms. Raw bone, half-grown nerves, musculature not designed by nature, but by trial. They're building from feedback, Gray whispered. Everything we've ever done wrong. They're learning from it. Kearns and Mace broke off first, moving toward the cradle's mid-line. Their mission, rig fusion shears along the central load-bearing spires, huge armored roots that connected gene chambers to the sequencing core. Severing them wouldn't collapse the cradle outright. It would make it starve. Mace planted the first charge, sweat beating down his temple. Feels like cutting into a beast's spine. It is, Kearns said. One that shouldn't have lived long enough to crawl. Vecker and Gray approached the core chamber, a sphere lined with fluid tanks and spinning arrays. Every second, new sequencing data was fed into the gestation algorithm. Adjustments were being made live. Musculature mass increased by 4%. Peripheral nerve delay decreased by 3.1%. Neural threat recognition reduced to reaction over strategy. Too aggressive, Gray muttered. They're overcorrecting, trying to adapt to fear of failure. Use it, Vecker ordered. Feed that feedback loop with poison. Gray uploaded a logic virus into the sequencer. False enhancement commands, unbalanced aggression markers, and unstable immunopathways. The next batch would be self-destructive by design. They'll never survive first contact, Gray said. They just need to eat themselves first, Vecker muttered. The cradle knew something was wrong. A pulse of warning logic fired through the chambers. Light surged. Biofluids hissed. The sequencing loop reacted with an emergency counter-mutation protocol. Delta Apex. Born not from template, but from raw urgency, Delta Apex emerged 7 meters tall, plated with instinctive armor, body cooled by synthetic lymph. Its chest carried a cluster of heat-reactive nodules, breathless, thoughtless, efficient. It didn't scream. It didn't growl. It moved. Straight for Gray. The blast from its first lunge shattered part of the core. Vecker tackled Gray sideways. Kearns intercepted, firing pulse shells that cratered the floor. Delta Apex didn't bleed. It evaporated flesh selectively, rerouting vital mass to stay functional. "It doesn't care about pain," Mace shouted, backhanding a tank loose and using it to trap the Apex's leg. "It doesn't know what pain is," Vecker snapped. They fired in unison. The Apex recoiled, but only slightly. Kearns took a spike to the shoulder, armor cracking, blood blooming. Mace roared and activated the final spine charge remotely, right under the Apex's stance. The blast shattered the floor. Delta Apex dropped, crushed between girder shards and ruptured biotissue. It twitched once, then froze, still watching them, still learning. Gray finalized the logic overwrite. The Cradle's AI processed the new data. All current strains were now flagged non-viable, redundant, genetically suicidal. It initiated full core cull. The chambers began self-devouring, biomass folding inward, gestation tubes melting into genetic slurry. Logic rot spread across every line of sequence code. Falk's team ran. Behind them, the Cradle didn't explode. It unfolded, coming apart like a living book erased mid-sentence. No screams, no mimicry, just failure written in flesh. 2 hours later, back aboard the Black Spire. Mace sat with his head back, eyes closed, barely conscious. Kearns had his shoulder resealed, blood dried to crust inside his exoseal. Gray stood alone, watching the orbit debris still venting glow from the Cradle's collapse. Vecker walked to the forward relay station. His report to command was 3 lines. Cradle neutralized. Strain cycle corrupted. Apex logic broken. He tapped send. Command's reply came over the encrypted line. Final signal scrubbed. No further movement detected. Predator network terminated. Conflict state concluded. The message ended with a phrase that had only ever appeared once before, decades ago, in a report from the early wars. Extinction directive executed. No medals, no glory, just the last breath of something that couldn't outlive the lesson it tried to overwrite. And one final thought, not spoken, but understood by every Terran still standing. They wanted to be Apex. We showed them what comes after Apex.